Maricopa County Supervisor Clint Hickman announces he won't run for re-election. He'll talk to us about his successes on the job, as well as the threats and harassment he faced. It's been a busy week in the legislature, with hundreds of bills debated on the House and Senate floors. Senate President Pro Tem TJ Shope joins us to sort it all out. And the county attorney says she refuses to extradite a murder suspect to New York City, triggering a war of words with the Manhattan DA.
I've been doing this now for 20 years. I have never seen anything like it.
That's all ahead on Politics Unplugged.
And good evening, I'm political editor Dennis Welch. This is Politics Unplugged, and Clint Hickman is a fourth-generation Arizonan and served on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors for more than a decade. But after becoming a frequent target of threats and harassment, he has announced he will not run for re-election. He joins us now. I want to thank you very much for taking some time out to explain this to us. Yeah, I mean, you've been on the board for a long time, and some people, you know, you could reasonably say, I've done this enough and I want to get out, but you were the target of harassments and threats going back to the elections, the 2020 and the 2022 elections. I want to ask you how much of that factored into your decision to not seek re-election?
Well, listen, that's a factor of many things. My record speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. I've always told people I want to do this job, do it effectively, do some great things for the West Valley. I think I've had enough time to do that. I think others sometimes should be self-reflective in that mode and say how much more is needed. But Dennis, the biggest thing was time back to the family. I've getting a little older, and I think I've served well in the public space, but my family is hitting some ages. My kids are hitting some ages that I want to be around for. My wife has done a fantastic job of getting us to this point with them, and I want to take that final thing of forming them into the adults that I know that they can be. So with I know you want to talk about the harassment. It's been out there. It's been in front of everybody now for the last 3 years after the 2020 election, even before it.
It takes a toll, though, doesn't it? I mean,
sure.
I mean, death threats.
My hair is grayer than it was 4 years ago. I'd like to think it has something to do with that and not naturally aging. But sure, it's taken a toll out of me. It's taken a toll out of my family. My family didn't ask for this. People came to my house even prior to the 2020 election and protested. This is the way things are becoming, and harassment of local officials needs to stop. It just needs to stop, and hopefully, but I want everyone to know that's not what is driving me out. The bad guys are not going to win. I don't speak their names. I don't talk about their juvenile behavior, and I'm just here to say the Valley's been well led, and I'm expecting big things out of whoever succeeds me.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in just a second,
okay.
But you said, like, this is the way elections have become. Are the threats against you and other elected officials at the county dying down, or is it still pretty consistent? Where are we with that now?
It ebbs and flows, and my colleagues would say that it ebbs and flows. It happens to be around the election space when there's somebody out running for office, making wild accusations. It feeds the beast to swing it up. I didn't have the most harassment my colleagues have received was during the Cyber Ninjas audit, and that was done basically to us by other elected officials to get this swung up. It was used as a fundraising device. The 2,000 Mules was used as a fundraising, the movie was used as a fundraising device. Now, looking in the court, just happened last week, the information from True the Vote that created this issue was found to be, there was no evidence. There was nothing. There's absolutely nothing to this. And again, it needs to stop.
Well, one of the people that wants to replace you is Congresswoman Debbie Lesko, big supporter of Donald Trump, where a lot of these conspiracy theories kind of emanated from, and his supporters. Is Debbie Lesko somebody that you could endorse?
Well, first of all, I'm going to make it clear to everybody that everybody's even calling me. And people are calling me right now for endorsements. And I plan on making no endorsements. I plan for the voter to do their own research. They've seen what has occurred when it comes to leadership in this county and this state. If they're satisfied and they feel that that's something that they can see themselves continuing to vote for, the divisiveness. So I'm not going to make any endorsements. I will just tell Debbie Lesko reached out to me after I made the announcement, and she called me and said, what does the job entail? And I might be interested. And I said, Debbie, you've been out in the district. You know the district. You've represented the same people. First, my jaw hit the floor a little bit, Dennis, because you usually see supervisors running for higher office to go to Congress. I've not seen a U.S. congressperson deciding to serve at a local level. And I'm going to take her for her word. She wants to get back in the community. She wants to be helpful to the community. She always has been. And I hope the best for her as she runs in a primary.
And given what you know about her, what do you think about her? How would you characterize her record when it comes to
Well, let me just tell you, Dennis, at a local level, at one point in the after the 2020 election and going towards this Cyber Ninjas audit, the entire GOP delegation wrote a letter to the county questioning us. She called me. She called me and said, Clint, what's going on? My other Congress people want me to sign this letter. And I said, Debbie, let me just take you through it. This is wrong. It's wrong-headed where this is headed. And let me tell you why. And she said, in my gut, Clint, it doesn't feel right. I haven't been able to research this, and I'm not going to sign that letter. So when people talk about me and my relationship with Debbie Lesko, I will never forget that night when she called and stepped away from the GOP delegation just to find out what my thoughts were. She didn't sign the letter. That meant everything to me. The letter came out, and I was very happy to tell my colleagues, at least we have one GOP representative that is not going to go down this road based on research that they don't care to give it.
All right, and one of the last things you're going to be doing before you step away from your position on the board is going to be certifying the election.
Absolutely.
What are you prepared for to happen this year? More of the same or something new?
Dennis, it's the same top two people, it looks like, coming our way for the very top of the election. And now the office just directly under it has the same person that has been using divisive comments. So my expectations are, if it's a close vote, here we go again. And so I'm expecting it. But let me just tell you, when people say, hey, are you getting run out? If I was going to be a quitter, it would have happened 3 years ago. I look forward to working with my colleagues to pull off 3 great elections that are coming up.
And final question here, I don't want to just focus on this issue. We did tease, we want to talk about what you accomplished here. You've been on the board 10 years. What do you think your legacy is? How do you want to be remembered?
Oh, I thought I was already building a legacy of the West Valley with my family business. I just wanted to be, hopefully, to be remembered as a public servant that did his best for the West Valley. Infrastructure, roads built, bridges built, buildings built, no debt, no interest payments. We're even slicing into the pension debt that this board acquired. And I just want to hope that everybody remembers that I dealt with this with integrity and courage. That's all I care about.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Clint Hickman. Thank you very much for joining us here on the show. And still ahead, legislative committees heard a flurry of bills this week. We'll sort through them with some help from State Senator TJ Shope when Politics Unplugged continues. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. A lot of activity at the Capitol this week with committees reading through a laundry list of bills. Here to talk about all of that is State Senate President Pro Tem TJ Shope. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having us
on this Friday. So we're halfway through the 100-day session. It always goes beyond
whatever that means.
Whatever the heck that means. We're halfway through that point. Bills have been heard in the committees. They've switched chambers now. Give us a sense, what are the trends you're seeing right now?
The trends I'm seeing right now are pretty typical for this time of year in the sense that a lot of bills that were assigned to Senate committee, I'm in the Senate obviously, so the bills that are moving through, they're moving over to the other chamber. That's where a lot of times the real hard work begins. Especially you have a bill that limps out with, whether it's a party line vote or, as some members experienced yesterday when we voted over 50 bills, some even were bipartisan, but the coalitions that were developed, can you hold that type of a coalition together on the other chambers? So it'll be interesting to see the next couple weeks. Generally, this is the beginning of the period of time where people's bills and hopes and dreams start to die off, and they have to realize that they have to work on something else perhaps, and budget is one of the things they often turn to.
Yeah, and we'll get to the budget in a second. Obviously, it's the one thing you're statutorily required to do is the budget. But I do want to talk about the bills. One of the things I've seen, everybody has talked about too, is the amount of vetoes, pending vetoes, veto bait, if you will, that's being passed and moved through the legislature. I don't have time to go through all the bills, but a lot of bills were vetoed by this governor last year. They're back again in some form or fashion this year, likely going to meet the same outcome. Why are Republicans wasting their time with this type of legislation?
Well, I think that every bill is a statement of whatever any member wants to make, whether they're Dems or ours. But yeah, there's a lot of things that probably, if they haven't been substantially changed over the last year or so, probably will meet up with the same fate. I can tell you I had 3 bills that were vetoed that I'm running again, but we've worked with the governor's office and we've worked with other stakeholders to make sure that that fate does not reach them this time around. And I feel pretty confident about that. But people oftentimes run legislation that they feel is making a statement for their side, and they have a right to do so. Having said that, circumstances often change. We've heard the governor talk a lot about the issues at the border, for example. I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen a few immigration bills rise to the surface on that are probably more in our direction, wanting to see, because we didn't send many of them up last year, where the governor is vis-a-vis her State of the State address.
And some of those immigration pieces of legislation, there is some questions about the constitutionality of this. One of the bills wants to make it a state crime to be in Arizona illegally. Your thought on that, because that has been pretty clearly delineated from the Supreme Court, but now we're hearing Republicans say, "Well, we got a different court now." Is that the whole point? Is to try to get something like this passed either through the legislature or by the voters, because there are some voter referendums that are being sent to the ballot, to get that passed and get it to the high court?
Yeah, I think that latter part is a valid issue for a lot of folks who are probably coming around to this. There was kind of a decade-long detente, if you will, on passing immigration-related bills and things like that through the legislature, and I think that you see with a different makeup, not just of the Supreme Court, but of the Ninth Circuit especially, of which Arizona is a part of. And I think that, once again, because we didn't send many up last year, we want to see, especially after the trips to the border that the governor made, the very first item that was discussed during the State of the State, how are we going to go ahead and make that drive of what we're trying to do? And I think that you're seeing a little bit of experimentation, but I think it's something I'm fully supportive of and would like to see done.
And some critics of the bill, obviously they're saying they're taking the state back to the 1070 days. The anti-immigration law was passed back in 2010, I believe. There was some blowback on that nationally, a lot of negative headlines. Arguments have been made and studies have been done to show there was an economic impact here to the state. Are you not at all worried about the same kind of blowback with some of these pieces of legislation?
I'm not at all worried about that at this point in time. I think that we have seen by the various polling data that has existed over the last couple of months that this is something that people are talking about. You hear the mantra of every state's a border state, or however it's discussed in the media. But this is something, obviously, it's always been an issue for Arizona. It's something that I know I've worked on in the past and continue to. So I think it's just something that we're trying to figure out where the voters are and what they would like to do. And I think that the path that we're taking right now is where they are.
Okay, and I don't want to discuss all the election bills, obviously, but one you did vote for was a measure proposed by John Kavanaugh. This would be the one that would toss out election results if there was a low turnout in those like non-traditional state, if it's not a statewide ballot.
Right.
So basically, couldn't we be seen looking at this as a way to attack like school bond and override elections,
right,
local city elections, and explain to me that if somebody votes in an election and it's a low turnout, and their results are tossed out, how is that not disenfranchising a voter?
I think it's a great conversation to have. I was a school board member for 12 years and voted to put some of these measures on the ballot in all mail elections, generally is how it's done, and these low turnout ones. And you're lucky if you have 10 or 15% of the turnout there. I think the senator's argument is, isn't that a disenfranchisement of the other 85% who choose not to participate? Of course, that is a choice as well. So it's a conversation that we'll have to have. That bill obviously will be, discussed on the floor ad nauseum, just like it was at that elections hearing. And I had the same kind of comments then. I think it's a conversation worth having. Is it ultimately where we should go? I don't know.
You voted for it in committee. Unless it's changed, do you vote for it on the floor in its current
form? In its current form, probably not. I think that there has to be a better way, because whatever we're doing in those low turnout elections, where oftentimes you will have millions of dollars in bonding or overrides and things like that passed by a very small percentage of the voters. I'm not sure that that's necessarily what we ought to be doing either. But if we could settle on moving some of these elections even to just a more generalized date when people are already voting, when turnout's over 50%, that's possibly where we need to go.
And let's wrap up with budget talks. Obviously, again, the one thing you guys are statutorily required by law to do. Where are we on this? The state is currently facing, correct me if I'm wrong, a pretty big budget deficit, about $850 million if you add up this year and the next year. Where are you on the talks, and where are the cuts going to come? Where's the money savings going to come from?
I think where we are on the talks is a little bit later than last year. However, I think it's in more of a traditional time frame. I'm looking at the 12 years I've been in the legislature, where we're going to go ahead and start meeting after now that crossover week has occurred. Probably the busiest pinch point of time in the legislative calendar has just passed us. So I think that meeting will be coming up with the governor's office, our Senate and House leadership, and I look forward to hearing how that happens. I mean, it's pretty clear to me that we have a problem in front of us, but it's not the problem of having to cut $1 billion out of a $7 billion budget like when I first got there. We're talking about $1 billion or so out of a $18 billion budget. I think it's manageable, and I think we can come to a resolution. Question, of course, is when.
All right, we're going to have to end it right there. But coming up next, County Attorney Rachel Mitchell says she's refusing to extradite a murder suspect to New York City. We'll hear from the woman who ran against Mitchell in the last election. That's next here on Politics Unplugged. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell made national headlines this week, insisting she would refuse to extradite a murder suspect to New York, accusing the Manhattan DA of being soft on crime. The DA quickly pointed out Manhattan's murder rate is less than half of the murder rate in Phoenix. And here to talk about this, Republican political consultant Marcus Dell'Artino and Julie Gunnigle, a Democrat who ran against Rachel Mitchell last year. I want to get your impressions on this. Thank you. First of all, thank you for being on the show, putting on the pundit hat and speaking to us here at the Saucer. Your thoughts, you ran against Rachel Mitchell. She's making some political hay out of this, even though it's like really not her call on extradition.
I mean, that's exactly right. And thank you for having me. There's big Andrew Thomas energy coming out of that office right now. And you almost have to marvel at the craven brilliance of this particular strategy, because what we're not talking about is the mishandling of the Gilbert Goons case, her threatening to cut a reporter's mic. We're not talking about the looming DOJ investigation or the sweetheart deal she gave to Chuck Ryan. So not to mention the fact that we're now correcting the record that she can't even refuse to extradite. That's not even her call under the law. Meanwhile, she's already done 2 victory laps on Fox News.
And my understanding is that ultimately this could go to the governor, and between the New York governor, Arizona governor. But Rachel Mitchell kind of wins politically by having this fight with the Manhattan DA, who is also going after Trump for the hush money payment.
I have full faith in Rachel Mitchell getting these guys on probably attempted murder. And when we're done and they're done serving their time in Arizona, he's happy to go back to New York. My guess is his lawyer is telling him right now, ask for extradition to New York, because they're going to be softer on you there than they ever will be in Arizona.
Thoughts on that?
Softer on a murder than a stabbing here in Arizona? No, that's just simply not the case. Be real here.
I am
Come
absolutely
on.
real that
No.
I will never trust a prosecutor from New York to be tough on crime.
I think
especially in light of beating up a cop.
I'd prefer our prosecutors to be tough on truth and be telling the truth about what the statute says. And that's really what's not happening here.
I don't think that there's been any untruth during this at all.
All right, well, it's good TV there, right there. Let's move on to another big story of the week. We want to talk about the Kari Lake, the Kari Lake issue. She is feuding now with Meghan McCain. She had reached out to the McCain people on Twitter. Specifically, she reached out to Meghan McCain on this, saying that she wanted to let bygones be bygones. But Meghan McCain was not having any of it, saying no peace. You can go read the whole tweet yourself. I can't repeat the whole thing here on television. Marcus, you were really tight with the McCain people, still are. Your thoughts on this? I mean, Kari Lake, is she going to be able to mend fences with the McCain camp?
No. And everybody keeps asking that question. I think it's obvious that that's not going to happen. And it would be obvious to anybody from the outside that that's not going to happen. Somebody needs to explain to me the strategy here, because let's just say you picked up 10% of the McCain people over here. You're going to lose at least 10% of those people that you told for over a year, that you hated John McCain, he was terrible for the party, he was a loser, a bunch of other stuff that I won't say on TV that's awful. So I'm not too sure the net effect is you don't actually lose more voters exercising the strategy rather than doubling down with where you were before. But that being said, all this changes with turnout. I know we've looked at some recent polls, and frankly, at this point in the race, they don't mean very much. I think the race is probably closer than most people think. We don't know what, Biden does not have energy on the left. I think that might have an effect, down ticket of voters turning out.
And Lake is trying to say that some of the jabs that she made at John McCain past few years, they were just jokes. Do you believe that? Do you buy that explanation? Do you think voters are going to buy that explanation?
Not for a second. And I never thought I'd hear these words come out of my mouth, but go Meghan McCain. I don't really know what gubernatorial cosplayer and future failed Senate candidate Kari Lake was expecting out of this apology. But it certainly, I don't think, plays well for her at all. And also, Twitter isn't real life. Most voters aren't on it. Most voters don't care about an apology. And I don't think it plays either way.
And do you think, at the end of the day as well, you're talking about the McCain apology and trying to reach out to the moderates. Is she going to be able to win more moderate support from, people coming out and endorsing her? And is the campaign working right now?
Listen, I think that their strategy was to court the Republican base, and that was the whole point of getting the NRSC endorsement, which was somewhat strange because now the NRSC is playing in primaries, because there is a primary in this race. Yeah. That's a massive change of tradition there. But I don't think those moderates are coming home. You can't say it was a joke, because people remember some other things that she said other than get out. There were some very vicious statements. And what you'll notice in some of these polls is Gallego is doing very well with the women voters against two women, which is Kari Lake and Kyrsten Sinema. So that in itself should be telling you something going on.
All right, going to have to end it there. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you guys for the discussion this week, but that is all the time. And be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.